A very good afternoon, everyone. The day we've all been looking forward to has finally arrived. I'm Amin Alvis, Organizing Committee President for Creative Circuit 3.0. And on behalf of everyone in AIESEC in University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, Sri Lanka, I warmly welcome each and every one of you to this star-studded event. This is the third occasion that we are hosting Creative Circuit, and our purpose is to encourage youth to engage more and more in the creative industry and ignite and explore their passions. Over the next few days, we will be having a multitude of sessions encompassing several critically acclaimed guest speakers from fields as diverse as gaming, teledrama, costume design, makeup artists, and so much more. We hope to take this as an opportunity to connect with our renowned guest speakers, to expand your knowledge, and for yourselves to ignite all of your passions. Each of our sessions will feature a segment where we forward audience questions to our speakers as well. So make sure to forward all your queries in the live stream and get them answered in the very best possible way. I'm certainly excited for what's to come, and I know you are too. And with that, let's now officially get Creative Circuit 3.0 underway.
What is AIESEC? AIESEC is the world's largest international youth-run organization which functions with the objective of developing youth with their leadership abilities. We have been providing leadership activities as well as international internships and volunteering experiences for global youth. What is AIESEC in University of Sri Jayawardhanapura? AIESEC in University of Sri Jayawardhanapura has been giving opportunities for graduate youth to empower their skills and talents for a long time. We have been enhancing our local committee by providing high-quality experiences and services to our members and exchange participants. What is Outgoing Global Talent and Outgoing Global Teacher? In AIESEC, the Outgoing Global Talent and Outgoing Global Teacher are responsible for providing globally recognized internships for the youth to develop their future career. Our internships are offered in all fields ranging from engineering, IT-related opportunities like software development, software engineering, business-related opportunities like business administration, business development, marketing, language teaching, as well as subject teaching. What sort of benefits does it offer? All our opportunities are facilitated with more benefits like free accommodation, free food, free airport pickups, and also a dazzling monthly salary. Other than that, the intern gets a globally recognized certificate, gain a multicultural working experience, can expand their professional network, and most importantly, they can kickstart their career with a bunch of novel experiences. What is Outgoing Global Volunteer? The Global Volunteer Program of AIESEC provides a cross-cultural volunteering experience in different countries for youth from aged 18 to 30 with the motive of developing your leadership skills. Our volunteering projects are aligned with sustainable development goals, which allow you to contribute to a greater social impact in an environment out of your comfort zone in a period of 6 weeks. Free accommodation, free meals, airport pickup and departure support, international recognition as a global volunteer are some of the endless benefits you can get as a global volunteer. Your radiant future is calling you. Take the best move to start a new version of your life. Get in touch with AIESEC.
Albert Einstein once said that creativity is seeing what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought. Greetings to all you creative souls. Let us follow what the wise has ever preached and open our eyes to see all and create the extraordinary. Welcome to Creative Circuit 3.0. My name is Oshadi, a proud AIESEC from the University of Sri Jayawardenepura, Sri Lanka. So to kickstart Creative Circuit 3.0, we have a very exciting session on creative industry in the corporate world. And for this, we warmly welcome Mr. Niruban Satchi from Sysco Labs. Welcome, Mr. Niruban Satchi. We are glad to have you here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for those kind words. Thank you for having me on board. Really excited. I think you set the bar quite high on the goals that I can live up to it. Thank you for AIESEC for putting this together. It's really easy to see that creativity is being recognized and the need for creative thinkers, communication is recognized at the university level. So I've been asked to talk on creating the corporate world, and I'm going to do that, but I'm just going to have the bigger corporate to share my screen and sorry, one second. All right. If at any point my screen is not visible or it's not inaudible, please give me a shout out. And let's start. I hope everything is okay. I hope that you can see the slides. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Niruban, we can see the slides.
Yes, my name is Niruban Satchi. What that means is that I am responsible for the creative function at the company, but that's all I do. I'm actually an accountant. My background is not in anything related to the creative field. I studied being an accountant. I self-taught myself design and art and everything else. I am still an experimental artist. I used to sort of paint and graffiti and all of that from some time ago. But now I'm just experimenting more with the process of different media. I also am proud for myself as a 3D junkie. I picked up data about 5 years ago, and I've been playing around with it, and I really love it too. And also, I think I have to mention this, my most recent qualifications that I'm a big fan. So they're about 5 days ago, so at any point I have to run on the move. You have to dabble because one day is tough, but two is 10 times as much tough. About that also. Okay, I want to play a little clip about Sysco Labs and what we do. I hope the audio.
But it was technology that separated us as a species. Technology that allowed us to eat better. Cultivate better. We designed smarter ways to grow the food we wanted to eat. And perfected science to make it last longer. The ways that we choose to eat keep evolving. food has now become an intimate part of our lives. It brings us together and shows how much we care, connects communities, and builds livelihoods for millions around the globe. But what if we could go further? What if we could trace the journey our food takes to better understand the impact it has on our planet, to make more sustainable food choices, transcend the limitations of time and space, to create a future of boundless abundance, and push the technology that enables food service to its next frontier? What if we could better connect the world to share food and care for one another? At Sysco Labs, we're finding solutions to do just this, because the technology that moves food moves human civilization.
All right. So that's a little bit about Sysco Labs and what we do. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to give a quick 10-second or 20-second intro about us. Sysco Labs is basically the captive innovation center for Cisco, which is a US company. They're a Fortune 500 company. They're ranked 17 Fortune 500. They're a huge company, and they are in the business of they distribute and manage and move food for food that is prepared away from home. So restaurants, university canteens, hotels, and you name it, luxury cruises, a whole bunch of stuff. They manage the food supply chain for those institutions. And Cisco Labs is a fully owned subsidiary of that company, and we are basically an in-house innovation team for Cisco. One thing I wanted to say is that I want to give a disclaimer: the views expressed are purely my personal opinions; they are not representative of Cisco Labs, and it's a lot of opinion, a lot of thoughts, something for you to think about, and yeah. All right, so let's talk about creative in corpos. I don't know if you've played the game Cyberpunk 2077, but they use the term corpo for corporate, and that's literally the image that came to my mind when I thought of the word corporate and how to be a creative in the corporate field. I've been formally in the creative corporate field for about 6 years now, and before that I was in accounting and consulting. And I thought I'll share some interesting perspective about how to manage this journey of being a creative in a corporate world. I feel like I have a little bit of a easier day because I was in consulting, and consulting is very much it's as corporate as it gets. And I took a lot of that attitude, a lot of that learning to my creative practice, and that has helped me a lot, although I'm not perfect by any means. So first thing is creative in the corporate field is very murky. It's very blurry. Nothing is clear. It's a very difficult thing to navigate into. And if you're going out of university into the corporate field and you're trying to figure out how to be a creative in the corporate world, it can be confusing. And it's okay, and that's the nature of it. Nature of it. And a lot of even experienced people still find it very confusing. And the thing about creative thinkers is that, interestingly enough, they are celebrated in the corporate world, right? The corporates love creative thinkers. So, three people here. Dieter Rams, he was the designer for electronics company called Braun, the German company, and his designs were so timeless, and that is kind of what inspired this modern day minimalist industrial design trend that we're seeing with companies like Apple. So you should Google his work up. He's sort of like the foundation for a lot of the design that we're seeing today. David Droga, he's an advertising creative, probably one of the most famous and prolific, somewhat controversial character in advertising, amazing creative. Corporates love him. In fact, his company got acquired by Accenture. And also Jessica Walsh. Jessica Walsh is a graphic designer who used to be part of Sagmeister and Walsh, and now she's practicing on her own. And again, her work, she's a US-based designer. She's got brands, like big brands from India and Europe and all over the world coming to her to do her signature style of work on their brands. And I'm talking big brands like Fruity from India and things like that. So they love creative people, right? So let's just get out of the way. They love creatives. But it's the creative process that gets butchered at corporates, right? They completely destroy the creative process. And that's what I'm here to talk about. Why is there a disconnect between how creatives are seen versus the process that allows them to actually do the creative work that they are called to do? So I call this the curatorial gap. So basically, if you look at your clients or corporates, there's a gap between knowing what they want, right? So let's just imagine for simplicity's sake that they want a logo done, right? So that's what they want. They know that. They know that clearly, right? But what they don't know is the steps on how to get there, right? And that's what I call the curatorial gap. As creatives, we see the whole process. We know where we are going and we know what are the steps we are going to do to get there. So if you're in a graphic designer, then you would know, okay, I need to sketch, I need to do some mock-ups, I need to explore different color palettes, and I need to do all these things to get to this final logo. Whereas a corporate might think you just turn on your computer and you hit a button that says design logo, and logo pops up. They might even say that you're doing your logo on Microsoft PowerPoint. Point being, there's a gap between in terms of knowing what the final product is and what the process is to get to that product. And that's what I call the curatorial gap, right? It's a term that I put together because this resonates a lot with me, and this is what I've been trying to solve for most part of my creative life. If you look at creative, the act of creation in general, it's a very iterative process. When I say iterative, it means that um, you start off with, say, at the top left, you have two options, then you explore those further, then you change that around, and then you explore that even more, and then you come back to the original design, you try another route, you come back, try, merge two things together. It's called iteration, right? So you do this many, many times to finally get to where you want to go, right? And this applies for all kinds of creative work endeavors. It doesn't have to be just designing. It could be in architecture, it could be cooking, it could be in music, photography, film, game development, costume design, you name it, it's everywhere, right? No creative gets to where they want at least something reasonably good or something new while without making errors and trying out different things along the way. So it's a very iterative process. Um, and basically what a creative does, and this is the creative, what I call the creative mindset, is that what you do is you create a lot of these tests and then you curate them. So I don't know if you've heard of the word curation. It means you have a wide option or a wide collection of things, and you start to sort of remove certain things that you don't like and sort of put together things that you do like. So most curators are found in museums or art galleries, where they essentially put together the pieces they feel would give the best message. And that's what we do as creatives. When we sketch on a sketchbook, when we are sort of jamming to music, whether we are writing out different things, or even if you're in a test kitchen, right? I believe that cooking is like one of the greatest forms of art. Even if you're in a test kitchen, we are curating our decisions. We're trying something, we're trying multiple things, and then we're trying to see which ones work, which ones don't, and then put those together, and then again iterate from there. So we curate our decisions. That's how we function as creatives. But if you look at most organizations, right, most businesses or companies, they love linear, predictable workflows, right? So they want to start at point A and end at point B, right? They don't want any disruptions. There's a little room for wiggle, there's little room for failure. And basically, it's just easier to plan and manage things when everything just works according to plan. This sort of thinking was sort of pioneered by Henry Ford and was sort of his conveyor belt manufacturing sort of ideology, and then that kind of took over everything else. But not many organizations work in iterative manner. The ones that do are the really disruptive, startups and big name companies, mostly in tech for some reason, that sort of iterate very quickly. So at most organizations, they are penalized for failed attempts, and this is something that a lot of organizational behavior change people are trying to change. They're trying to get a culture of accepting failure in corporates, but that journey, there's a lot more to go. So this is sort of where the mismatch is. Creatives want to try different things, fail. Corporates like to have predictable outcomes. All right. So as a creative, your biggest challenge is not the work itself, but the um, wit, right? Your wit or your skills that you need to convince someone that this is the best iteration possible. So if you're a logo designer, it really is not about how well you know Photoshop or how well you know Illustrator or how well you can draw or any number of things. If you're a photographer, it's not about how well you know your cameras and lenses or how well you know your color grading. If you're any kind of creative, it's not so much as about your technical capabilities, but in your ability to convince the sponsor or the client that this is the best iteration for them. So if you drew 100 logos, you never should show all 100 logos to the client. That's like a no-no, right? Your biggest challenge is to find the right logo and then convince the client that, hey, this is the best version of everything that I've done for your requirement. And that's our goal in terms of client creative relationship. That's what we want to do. We want to convince them that we know what's best for their requirement. And it's a three-way relationship. It's a relationship between the creator, the client. So when I say client, it doesn't necessarily mean an outside party. It could be a party inside your own company. So at Sysco Labs, my clients are the other departments that I work with, right? And then that's the consumer. So the client also has a relationship with the consumer. You as a creator, you also resonate with the consumer. You know what they're thinking, what their likes and dislikes are. And you also have a need to satisfy the needs of the client, right? And they are a whole view of things. And that's where you have a lot of these arguments about, oh, I think this is nice. I don't think this is nice. I don't like this color. I like this color, and all those kind of conversations. If you're a good creative, what you will start to do is that you will start to close the gap between client and creator. So the closer you close the top gap, the closer the gap between the two of you and the consumer can be filled. So in an ideal world, and this is something that the biggest brands have done very well. So I am close to the advertising world in terms of creativity than any other sector. So in advertising world, if you look at the brands that are like doing really great, they have a really good relationship between the client or the brand and the advertising agency that's doing the work for them. The relationship is really good and they are very well aligned. And the closer the gap, the easier it is to close the gap between the brand and the consumer. If not, the client is fighting a two-way war between the creative and the consumer, and the creative is fighting again a two-way battle between the client and the consumer. So close the gap between yourself and the client, and that's the way how you can close the gap with the consumer. So the main way you close this gap is by stretching their imagination. Now, you as a creative, you have fantastic imagination. You don't even need to see things. Someone can just give you a word and the whole world just builds up in your mind. But you have to understand, not everyone has wild imagination. And in fact, it's this ability to imagine is what sets creatives apart from, let's just say, non-creatives, all right? And the way you close this gap is by doing things like storyboards, concept art. So this is a storyboard for a scene from Avatar by Avatar, the alien, I forgot the director's name, James Cameron, right? This is a concept art for a video game. So before things go to the developers and the 3D artists, some artists have to sit down and sort of stretch their imagination and say, okay, this is the mood and the look we want for the characters. And even something technical like automotive design, it all starts with a sketch, right? A concept sketch, where you help them visualize and imagine things, because
the more technical things get and the more people are involved, the more important it is to have sort of a singular vision or a clear vision. So that's what we do with clients, right? So you help them imagine things. So if you're a graphic designer, what you would do is you would take their logo and you would put it on various mock-ups. You would put it on a business card, on a coffee cup, on a t-shirt, and say, okay, this is how your brand is going to come alive. If you are a filmmaker, then what you can do is you can find reference films, and then you can cut together parts of a reference film and say, this is how the shot is going to look. This is the color grading. This is the kind of audio that you want, and you want them to sort of close that imagination gap, right? But this is a very expensive process. This is a lot of effort, and I absolutely hate this way of convincing people, because you never really know what's actually going on in their head. I could show them the finished product. I could still never understand what the client is thinking. The second way to close the gap, and this is my favorite way, and you can listen to people like Chris Do and creatives like that, and what they'll tell you is that you need to build trust, right? And that's where it becomes an extremely personal, relational thing. Because as a creative, when you're serving another person, it's almost like the relationship you have with a doctor, right? When you go and get diagnosed with a doctor, the doctor will say, okay, you're sick, you have this problem in your stomach, you need to take this pills. You really don't know, you can't see it happening, you just feel those symptoms, and you don't know what the drug is, you don't know anything about what those drugs will do. You have to trust that this doctor knows what he's doing, and that's why it's going to work, and you're going to take that treatment, right? In the same way as creatives, we need to, our clients may not see the entire picture through to the end. They may not visualize, okay, this is how this whole film or this creative work is going to come together, but I'm going to trust this guy, right? And trust is like the most important skill for you to have with a client. And that's why creatives do things like portfolios and demos, because that shows credibility. It shows it's not so much as to showing this what you can do. It's about showing that, hey, this person can be trusted to deliver this kind of work. I have done all kinds of work to this date with all sorts of clients, and I still don't have a portfolio site. The reason is because it's based on trust, it's based on referrals. I get a lot of referrals. People have referred me to things. Even me ending up at Sysco Labs, it was not so much, like I had an amazing CV or whatever. It's because I worked with Sysco Labs before. They had some trust, and they knew that I was a reliable person. So trust and referrals, that's how you close the gap, and you show people, okay, this person can do the job. So keep that in mind, and that's super important. I'll come to it later. Now, with trust comes another issue about how many people are operating in the market, all right? So instead of saying the bar is high or bar is low, I'm going to say the bar is now a ladder, because there are multiple points at which you can enter the creative profession. You can enter as a complete amateur, or you can enter at a very high level. And I'll tell you what I mean. Anybody can create a piece of creative output. And this is like the dilemma I have right now. If you are a filmmaker or a video creator, you know right now that the work or the videos that get passed around or become viral tend to have the lowest quality in terms of cinematography or classical filmmaking craft. A lot of these videos are shot with phone, your TikTok, and all of that. So, do you really need to learn Premiere Pro or Final Cut? Do you really need to know the different codecs and compression ratios and lenses and all of that to be a filmmaker? Do you really need to know the technicalities of Photoshop and Illustrator and graphic design theory and all of that? Because this piece right here is a piece of art generated by an AI program called Disco Diffusion. So with like AI generative art, that's a whole other thing. I won't get into it right now, but machines can create a lot of the content, and you have tools like Canva, you have tools like TikTok that allow almost anybody to be a creator, right? So again, if you look at this ladder, I'm not saying they're low or high. I'm just saying it's a different point to enter a creative work. So the question is, if you were a content creator who uses Canva, the question is, could you get a job as a professional graphic designer, or could you start charging clients for professional graphic design work? I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't know. And also the question is, it's not so much about how it's done, right? It's not so much about the technique and whether you should use these tools or not, and whether it's cheating or not. It all, again, it's very contextual. So where do we draw the line? On my left is a screenshot from a game called Cuphead, and on the right is Genshin Impact, and both are very popular games. And the common thing is they both have this 2D hand-drawn animation style to it. So Cuphead has a what's called a rubber hose animation, like Walt Disney cartoons back in the day, and Genshin Impact has like a very anime-looking, cel-shaded look, right? So they both look hand-drawn. Cuphead was literally drawn by hand. They drew every character by hand and animated it on like a 2D platform. So it's quite labor intensive. And Genshin Impact is basically, they use a 3D program to give it a 3D, 2D look using what's called shaders, all right? So they could have also made Cuphead the same way. They could have used a 3D program and then given it a 2D look, and they wouldn't have to hand draw everything. So is it to say that Cuphead is better than Genshin Impact, or Genshin Impact is more creative or more smarter, technically more superior than Cuphead? I think that's like the battle that we're going to have as creatives going forward. And where do we draw the line in terms of what's acceptable as using machines and other tools as part of our portfolio, right? Even using a computer in the first place is using a tool, right? We are not back in the day, art directors had to draw everything by hand and, like cut posters using blades and stuff. We don't do any of that anymore, right? Fun fact, a lot of the tools on Photoshop, the tool icons on Photoshop, they're all icons that are representative of a physical tool, right? So the marquee tool, that's like a blade icon. That's because people literally use blades like that to cut, photographs and, put them together. Or the airbrush tool, that's literally an airbrush that they use for touching up photos. So, where do we draw the line in terms of using these tools to create our work? And I don't know the answer for that. All I know is that you have to be mindful of this. So you can use Canva, you can use TikTok, do whatever it takes. But I'll talk about what actually sets the creative apart from, let's say, a non-creative person. I hate that word non-creative, but it's not just, let's look at that. So creative, another thing I want to tackle before going any further is that creative is not just for the eyes, all right? So creative output can stimulate all our senses, right? So hearing, touch, smell, taste, seeing, everything, right? It also can stimulate our cognitive abilities, like our intelligence and curiosity, and also the emotive, like our emotions and feelings. So it can stimulate a lot of things. So don't limit creative to just things that you can see. So things that you can see are like visual media, right? Or audio visual media, like graphic design, fashion design, architecture. Well, architecture is both seeing and feeling. Fashion is also feeling. But cooking, no one talks about cooking as a creative profession, or creative programming, right? Programming is also, in some instances, can be a creative endeavor. And the thing about visual creative is that it's so accessible, right? Not just right now, it's always been a very accessible creative domain, right? So on the left, you see some scribbles on a wall by some children, right? So all you need to be visually creative is literally a crayon, and like a 2-year-old could produce like a masterpiece, right? So it's super accessible. And that's why it makes it so difficult to judge. So on the right-hand side is a piece by an artist called Xcopy. Xcopy is a NFT artist, and he's one of the highest selling NFT artists right now. If I told you that Xcopy's work were done by a child, you might have believed it, right? Or if I showed you the picture on the left and said, well, that is actually a print of an Xcopy work, you might have believed it. I don't know. So it's because it's so accessible, the medium is so accessible, like you could enter it as a child, and that's a great thing. That's the great thing about visual media. For other things, you have to go a little old and you need some technical skills. So for music, you need to be a little bit technical, but for visual creatives, it's anyone can do it. And that's why it's very important to have context about what you're doing and who you're doing it for. One of my favorite graphic design pieces is the logo for Nat Geo, right? I don't know if you know why the Nat Geo logo is a yellow square or yellow rectangle. You see it on TV, and you might look at this and think, well, I could have done it. And you could have. Anyone could have done it. You could have done this logo on PowerPoint if you wanted to. That's not the point. This was done by one of the biggest branding agencies. I can't remember the name. So I know their name, but it's very difficult to pronounce, so I'm not going to say it. And basically, the beauty of the Nat Geo logo, or the simplicity of it, was that Nat Geo was first a magazine, a printed magazine, right? And it's a signature look for the magazine was the front cover had a yellow border around it, right? And that's how you recognize the Nat Geo magazine. And essentially, it was the intelligence, the trust, the wit of that designer to think, okay, this is the identity of Nat Geo. This is what it's all about. It's a yellow square. Any other way of approaching it, that this logo, you would have ended up with a globe or a tree or a flower or an animal or something to do with the earth and planet and everything, but it was that the smartness of the designer to recognize that the company's identity was this yellow border around the magazine, which then used as a frame to frame various things. So as a visual creative, because the bar is so wide and it's super accessible, you need to understand the context and who you're talking to and what makes them tick. And that's what's going to set you apart as a phenomenal, exceptional creative. All right. So I've spoken quite a bit about what it means to be a creative operating in the corporate world. I've spoken a little bit about what you do right now in terms of with all these tools that are accessible. How do you go about approaching it? Whether you should use those tools or not. I want to talk about at what point do you stop being a creative and transcend to being an artist, right? And this is the debate, or this is the struggle of my life. I'm trying to figure out what sets an artist apart from, say, a person who does some sort of creative, commercially creative work for a living, right? So it's a very fine line, and it's very difficult to decide. And it's important to remember that when you're working in the creative, in the corporate world, right, you have to realize that it's a service of a commercial venture, right? It's in service of a commercial venture, meaning that you're doing something for someone else to help them to make more money, right? That you have to keep that in your mind. It's not about having the most prettiest thing, or it's not about having the most beautiful thing. It's not even about what you think is right, because you have to keep in mind that a lot of your clients, you can't really say that you know their customers better than them. They spend a lot of time learning and understanding how their customers work, right? They have a different perspective on it, but that's not to say that they don't know about anything about their customers. So never, ever, ever, ever tell your client that you know better than them when it comes to creating piece of work. Because that's not true, right? You're also learning, they're also learning. So you're either in service of a commercial venture or popular culture, right? So when I say popular culture, so for example, if you're doing a superhero movie, right, or if you're working on a first-person shooter game, it's still a creative service because people's expectations have already been set, right? So you're trying to essentially meet that expectation about what that creative product should be. So remember that creative in service of a commercial venture or popular culture is still a creative service. It's not art, right? So just because you're working on a film or a movie, it doesn't automatically become art. If you're working on a documentary, it doesn't automatically become art. And I'll talk about why I draw this distinction. You have to keep in mind it's a commercial service, right? And with that should come the service mindset. So this is a bit controversial. This is like I thought about this long and hard, and I sort of put this together to like I'm not trying to downplay anything, the importance or anything. So I'm just looking at this purely as a creative exercise. All right. So it's important to understand what is the creative that serves an existing emotion, right? So on the left, I have fan art of the movie Batman. On the right, I have protest art of the current situation in the country. And I think they are both creative, like commercial creative products, as opposed to what I would consider art. And I'll tell you the reason for that. So everyone has an emotion, or fans of comic books or Batman have a strong emotion tied to that particular character and the characters around that, right? So with this fan art, what you're trying to do is you're trying to like tap into that emotion. That emotion already exists, right? You're just trying to connect with that existing emotion, or that emotion is very visible, right? This dark character and all of that, like this Batman, right? For various reasons, you might do it to because that's how you make a living. You sell fan art, or it's because you want to build a following on Instagram, or you want to express your emotions about that subject or whatever, right? And the same thing I thought for a lot of the protest art that I saw is that it wonderfully captures the prevailing emotion, right? I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of it here, but basically I thought I saw a lot of, I didn't want to put any of like personal people's Instagram over here, but I thought that a lot of the protest art was good. It captured people's emotions very well, and that's why they were widely shared on social media and sort of used as a platform to help people express their feelings, right? But here's the catch. This protest art came in when people were already sort of angry and they were upset and they were going through a tough time and all of that. So it tapped into an existing emotion. And I think this is very good example of what I would consider commercial art. So whether you're creative working in the professional industry, your goal most of the time, and your goal should be to tap into an existing emotion. If people feel a certain way about soap, then you need to basically tap into that emotion when you're creating a brand logo for soap. If people feel a certain way about coffee and coffee culture, that's what you need to take in mind when you make a logo for a coffee company. If people have a certain emotion about a fitness culture or fitness brand, then that's what you need to do when you make an advertisement or film for a fitness company. So I call this creative services that serve an existing emotion. I think they're pretty close to commercial creative, right? It's still not art. So I thought, what is art? And I thought it's interesting to point out the work of Chandragupta Tenuvara, right? He's a Sri Lankan artist. You might have heard of him. Some of you might have studied under him. He did this piece called Barbarism, right? Or this collection of pieces called Barbarism. I'm not an expert on fine art, so please don't quote me on this. But basically, he found an interesting abstraction on, certain political views, right? And he took his own political views and his opinions. And in some ways, I would say this is protest art before anyone like saw protest art come, right? He was protesting against certain things, and he sort of was able to sort of foresee that, and he made this piece of art. And he in turn inspired me in the sense that I don't know if you know, sometime in 2019 there was this whole election issue, and basically Chandragupta Tenura was one of the people who filed you know a petition or some legal case against the incumbent president or one of the contestants based on certain grounds, right? And when that person came to be the president, he had to leave the country. And there was this iconic picture of him at the airport, holding his suitcase and, fleeing for the safety of his life um, at the airport. And I thought, that's really interesting because here's a person who not only sort of, in retrospect, I was thinking, here's a person not only just embodied his art, he embodied his art, so he not just made pretty pictures, he acted on it, but he also saw something which other people could not, and that's what was so striking to me about him and his work. And I think that's where I started to understand, okay, this is what the role of an artist is if you look at art in its purest form, and I'm going from commercial creativity to art, is because sometimes people confuse the two things. And like the moderator talked about Albert Einstein's quote on art and imagination and creativity. I think art is about bringing to life the human experience that is yet unseen. If you are tapping into an emotion or a human experience that is already happening and your work is reflecting that, then I think it falls more into sort of creative services, like you're trying to service their emotions, you're trying to help people express their existing emotions. But the point at which that moves from creative services to art is when you are bringing to life something that has never been seen before, right? And it's very, very hard, and it's not right to do it at the expense of someone else's money, right? And again, that's another debate. And if you are like a commercial creative, remember you're serving a commercial goal, and you can't use those resources to try some wild experiment to bring about an experience that may or may not be felt. But there are exceptions. When your art starts to inspire other art, then you start to build that thing I told, trust, right? So if you want to call yourself, you will learn all of that. But he's an artist, right? He's a painter. That's what he does. Christopher Nolan, on the other hand, renowned filmmaker. You might think that his work is a commercial work, right? His commercial service. He makes movies for studios, and he has a duty to make sure that the studio recovers the money they invested in his film. But the interesting is, I don't know if you know that it was one of Francis Bacon's paintings that inspired Christopher Nolan for the Dark Knight series, right? And he built the Joker around one of Francis Bacon's paintings. And through time, Christopher Nolan has won the hearts and minds of his sponsors and also his audience, to the point where he can now do something that brings out an entirely different experience or human emotion without having to sacrifice the commercial success of his work. So the best example is Tenet, right? Or even Inception. Like, are they works of art or are they commercial creative pieces? I think they're both, and that's the best of what we should try to achieve. We should try to work on our portfolio and work on our skill so that we can serve our commercial goals. But we should also inspire and be inspired by other artists and essentially build credibility and trust where we can come to a point, and confidence where we can come to a point and be like, okay, this is my work. It satisfies your commercial goals, but it's going to give people something completely new. So someone like Christopher Nolan is probably a good person to look at in terms of what it means to be a creative who is commercially successful, but also extremely creative and original in the way he sees and does things. That's it from me. So I hope you sort of had an understanding of what it means to be a creative in in a commercial setting or in a corporate setting. This is my email address, or you can talk to me on Instagram. If you have questions, I can take those questions right now.
Thank you, Mr. Niruban. And as we know, we have a large crowd joining us today, and we have a few questions that are forwarded by the audience. So the first question is, what qualities does a creative director most need to be successful?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the creative director needs to, like I said, needs to have two things, right? Obviously, they need to have a creative vision, and they need to know what's the best way to get to that creative vision. That includes all the technical skills in terms of, right, your writing, filmmaking, all of that. But most importantly, it's your ability, like I said, to know who your client is and what they want is, and the ability to tackle their doubts, their questions, help them imagine. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to inspire them so that you can get them to do what you think is best for the brand. So two things. Technically, you need to be savvy, and B, you need to be able to build trust and credibility with your sponsors.
So we have another question, and this is, what's been the biggest creative challenge in your career to date?
Oh, my biggest creative challenge, again. So, okay, first of all, every project is super challenging from a creative content or creative output point of view. With every project, you're trying to push yourself in terms of either the design quality or the idea. Um, it's very hard to land on a good idea and to bring that to life. But I would say the biggest challenge that I've had personally is in terms of trying to clear a big budget. I think that is the toughest challenge. So the thing is, if once you come into the corporate world, you realize that uh, people are okay with the work that you do. As in, like, there'll be some creative discrepancies in terms of changing the color, this, that, and the other. But like, for example, the Sysco Labs film that you saw, it was quite an expensive film, and the biggest challenge was, giving people the trust that the money spent on it would be worthwhile, right? So that's what I've faced as a creative challenge. But one thing I do have to admit is that one challenge that is there throughout all the work that I've done is this question of self-doubt. Like, you're thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I correct in what I'm saying? Do I even know what I'm doing? People call it imposter syndrome. You always feel that you're not qualified or you're not fit to do the work that you're doing, or that you're scamming them. But that'll be, I would say, that's like the highest level challenge that's going to be there in your head throughout your career. But the biggest one I've faced today has always been about getting budgets.
Okay. We do also have one last question, and this is, who are some of your biggest influences from the creative world?
Okay, so I've had many people inspire me at various points in time. Right now, I would say I'm inspired by a person called Ton Rosenda. He is the founder of the Blender organization, and he has basically done something where he created this amazing product that enables so many artists to get this really good tool for free, right? And I think that's amazing. But so Ton is my inspiration right now in terms of making design accessible to a lot of people. But my first inspiration was this artist called Marko Djordjevic. He's a German Albanian comic book illustrator. you should look it up. And yeah, it's by far my favorite artist.
One more question from the audience, and this is, how can I be creative in a social platform?
Okay, so I'm guessing that means a social platform like social media. um, See that social media is so tricky, right? One thing is you have to play the algorithm. You have to do that whole thing about being, relevant to the platform that you're in. If it's Instagram, then how frequently you post, the hashtags. If it's YouTube, then the kind of pillars that you are. But I think, and I'm not an expert on how to make it successfully on a social platform, but the best work and the most prolific artists that I've seen on social media, especially if you look at the digital artists like the NFT artists, is that they have a clear, consistent style, which is something I failed terribly at. And the best artists have a clear, recognizable style and don't settle on that style too early. I made that mistake. I thought this was my style and I settled on it too early and I realized it's not. Settle, take your time. But once you found your style and your tone of voice, stick with it. And I think you'll be distinctive. And if you're distinctive, that's how you'll be recognizable in the social space. I want to draw one example. I don't know if you've seen this Sri Lankan animator called Randy Chris. And the moment you see his animations, you know it's a Randy Chris piece. Even Eminem did a music video with Randy Chris. So he's built a very clear, distinctive style for himself. And that's what helps him to sort of stand apart from all the other animators in the social media space.
One for your questions. We have come to the end of our first session. That was an amazing session, and I'm pretty sure, if anything, this has only elevated the enthusiasm for creative industry within our passionate, creative, and talented community. Thank you, Mr. Niruban, for that amazing session, for sharing such exclusive knowledge with us. I cannot emphasize how exciting of a journey it has been with you for the past hour. Once again, thank you very much for today, and we hope to cross paths with you in the future in vision to pioneer passion for creativity. Stay tuned with us as we will be having the next session for Creative Circuit 3.0 at 3 p.m. Join us again to meet Mr. Abhishek Pandey. Thank you.
and trusted brands like HiFlex, AlphaTech, Microflex, and Gamex. And we're leveraging our master data and safety know-how to deliver solutions to customers worldwide through new digital channels.